Okay, this is Steve Hancock's. He says, on several of your videos, Ash has mentioned differences between WLA and WLC versions of bike. One of these appears to be the position of the main front light, high on some so you can mount ammunition on front mudguard, low on others with the horn above. I was wondering if this is optional. Can you mount the headlight high or low? Just a case of repositioning a bracket, or are they in a fixed position?
No, there's two different types of bracket. There's, I think it's year related for the height, because you can get a WLA, I think, with a high and low. I should look on liberator.com. Harley Davidson 42 WLA. Facts and figures, basic information. Right, they should give you your Mark 7s and... Right, there you go, look. So you got Type 1, high ammo box, first pattern front fender, round high headlamp on a Type 1. If you on that scale before it gave you the dates and numbers, yeah?
Yeah.
So a Type 1's got a high headlamp, a Type 2's got a low headlight, Type 3, low headlamp, Type 4, low headlight. So basically only your, by the looks of it, rectangular air filter, low headlamp again, low headlamp again, low headlamp again. So only the Type 1 had a high headlamp by the looks of it on the WLA, yeah?
Right.
So if you go back up here, it's all date and age related, you know. There you go, look, Type 1, September the 1st, 1941 to December the 10th, 1941. Engine numbers 42 WLA 1000 to 42 WLA 7000. So anything with those had a high headlamp. Anything after that had a low headlamp. And the brackets, I can't remember whether they're in the parts book. If you look up WLC, right, there you go. Right, so they did a WLC domestic. It explains what everything is on here, yeah?
Yeah.
If you look on this site, and WLC export. So that's got a straightforward WLC. That is high headlamp, large marker and rear lights, auxiliary toolbox on front fender, sometimes on rear fender, low tandem seat, blackout equipment in the box, stop lamp cut off switch on the right, which we discussed before. Right, and a domestic has got the low headlamp, the small marker lamps, high tandem seat, stop lamp cut off switch on the right rear forks, rectangular air cleaner. So again, the export is a low mounted headlamp. So if you go through all of these, yeah, so it'll give you WLC production, and it will go through what's the domestic. There are your two different, well, that's a WLC with the Canadian military pattern lights. They're the early ones with the large ones. But basically it's liberator.be, this site, yeah, and you've got to sit there and rake through it a bit, but it explains everything. And that will tell you, you can look at your engine number and that'll tell you whether it should be high headlamp, low headlamp, what air filter it should have on it, what mud guards it should have on it. It's quite involved, you have to go through it,
Yeah.
but that is the site that will tell you. And I think by general consensus, they're pretty up together. They know what they're talking about, you know. Off the top of my head, but yes, you can change. It's just bracketry. You just change them and move them all around the other way.
Gary Bianchi says, what are the best modern spark plugs to use for WLA or WLC?
I think they're NGK-A6s.
Cool.
Yeah, you get all different. The original ones, because the fuel was so bad, you got different heat ranges and all sorts. But I think it's an A6, NGK-A6.
And they're readily available.
Yeah, any of your sites will do them. Any shop should all be able to order them in. I mean, you won't get one in Halfords, but any of your sort of general bigger motor dealers will order them in for you.
Cool. David Bowie's, I have a WLA frame with similar markings on the frame, but they also include Japanese symbols. Have you ever seen anything like that before?
No, I haven't. No. Who knows? During the war, it could have been captured by the Japanese, taken back to Japan, stamped up. They did make a copy, I think, or something similar. It might have been like a XA copy. I can't remember now. Japanese wartime Harley copy. The Japanese built in Japan before and after World War II. Factories to make HD copies. I know there was something about it. I know they did copy one. How close they were to a Harley Davidson, who knows? It might be a Japanese bike. Without seeing the frame, it's very hard to know, you know?
What's the most unusual markings you've seen?
I've had Russian ones with all sorts of, the Indians, with all sorts of stuff all over them. I mean, if you go online, all the lugs on a Harley frame are numbered. They've all got cast numbers in them.
Okay.
So like your belly pan where the engine is, that'll have a cast number in it. The rear forks where this wheel slides in, I think it's Z something, that's got a casting number in it. The headstock's got a casting number in it. So that will tell you if it is Harley Davidson. If it hasn't got any of that and it's marked up with Japanese, it could be a Japanese frame.
So it's not like the ones in Europe which get stamped up for...
Unless they impressed one, unless they got one, captured it, you know, took it back to Japan, and to get through their military numbering system they had to stamp it or something. Who knows? Who knows?
Charles Wiley. The cam cover was chromed many years ago, and the flutter valve that allows oil from the breather tube reservoir back to the crankcase is frozen solid.
Yeah.
Have you ever replaced or repaired one?
Yep. Just done one. I'll show you one. Oh shit. Right, that's your flap valve in there. Flapper valve, they call them. Can you see that little bit right in the middle, in the centre circle? That's the actual valve.
Okay.
So that inner piece will come out. If you listen, you should only be able to suck through it. You hear that?
Yeah.
Can't blow through it, you can only suck through it.
Okay.
So if your oil reaches a level that it's actually dropping down out of here, that sucks it back into the lower crankcase, so the scavenge pump picks it up. If you undo those four rather, take that off, yeah? There's a hole in there. What I do is I tend to get a Dremel. See these mashed over bits where they punched it in?
Yeah.
Try and get a little tiny Dremel, just take the edges off, yeah? And there's a hole in there that goes that way, okay? So if you get, I use a bit of like 3/16 to maybe a bit bigger than that, 1/8 of an inch welding rod, cut it down and you can hook it in that hole, yeah? And then just clamp this in the vise nice and tight, get a punch on it and just bash it out, and then that will pop out. And when you put it in, make sure it's all nice and clean around there. So you won't be able to slide it in. You can heat the casing and then it'll either drop in or get something. You don't want to hit this in a bit, okay?
Mm-hmm.
See that in a bit there? You don't want to hit that. You want to make sure you're hitting on the outer side.
Okay.
And don't smash it. Just tap it in gently. If you dislodge that flapper valve, it won't work. So heat the casing, make sure that's all nice and clean. Once you've got it out, tap it in on that outer piece. Don't ever hit the middle bit, because it will just ruin it completely straight away. And then just peen your edges back over, and then make sure it's nice and smooth on there for your mating surface. That's it.
Cool.
Yeah, hog parts do them. I think they're 11 quid.
Alan McCluskey says, can I put a battery tender on my 65 panhead, while still connected to the bike if monitored? If not, do I have to repolarize if I have to remove the battery for charging?
No, you shouldn't have to repolarise if you want to remove your battery for charging. That shouldn't make any difference at all. What year? 65?
65, yeah.
So that's running a voltage regulator, I would imagine, a 2-point, a 2-brush Jenny.
So can you put a battery tender on it?
Should be able to, as long as it hasn't got any electronic. If it's got a rectifier regulator on it, which it shouldn't have in 65, but you get aftermarket ones, aftermarket generators with them in. If it's got one of those on it, don't put a tender on it, because if it's running an electronic regulator rectifier, don't put a tender on it. But if it's just straightforward generator voltage regulator, it'll be fine, and you shouldn't have to repolarise anything.
Gary Bianchi says, I'm just curious, what's the most hardest case for Ash to solve on a vehicle?
Hardest case? Michael Fixamer's blue one. Could never get it running right till I realised he starts first time, does this, does that. The cam timing was wrong. One of the cams was one tooth out. So until you actually worked out in your head, it can't be anything else. Stripped the carburetor, made sure all the inlet manifolds were tightened up properly, no air leaks, reset your timing, reset your timing, reset your timing, do the mixture on the carburetor, and then realised there's something wrong here, it isn't right, you know. So then you've got to take the cam chest off, check all your cam timing. One of the cams was one tooth out. That's quite frustrating.
What about on a car? What have you come across on a car that you thought,
oh, blimey. Did a Hudson for Gordon years ago, and every single bit of it was worn out. Everything. Absolutely everything. It must have been a farmyard car in America or something. And that's just mind-bogglingly boring, just going through everything. I've had some problems with two-strokes in the past that can be very frustrating, because they rely on air sealing, not oil sealing.
Yeah. On
your crankshaft. There's all air. I mean, if you've got any bit of air going into one of them, you'll riding along, lovely, hit the power band, lovely, loads of power, and it just blow up. Yeah. So you can chase things like that forever and ever and ever. You've got to just sit down, take your time, and go through things. Yeah, it gets frustrating without a doubt. First Buick Straight 8 I did, trying to get the cam timing right, because back then I didn't have any information. You couldn't get workshop manuals and all of that rubbish. So trying to time the cam up, it turns out you don't have a dot to dot. And normally when you set a modern cam chain up, you've got your small pulley on the crankshaft, your large pulley on the camshaft.
Yeah.
You have two dots.
That's it.
You line them up, so your two dots are there. But on a Buick, dots go that way, and you count 21 links or 18 links between them. So, you know,
you learn very quickly, don't you?
Yeah, but that was sitting there with a cam degree wheel and working out like that can't open that early. It's impossible. Blah 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 blah. So you get it in the end. It's just trial and error, you know.
Tim Wheeler. I noticed several of the WLAs and WLCs you've worked on have the brake handle mounted on the right hand side of the handlebars. As WLA original setup with a left hand side brake handle, what are your thoughts on the viability of the right hand side setup when combining the non-return throttle hand foot clutch and left hand tank shift? I reckon hill starts would be very touchy.
Basically the front brakes don't work anyway. So it's a lot of people do it. I can't remember. I think WLCs originally, because I think the hand clutch, I think they swapped them over on WLC. I can't remember whether originally the WLC had the clutch on the left or the right. They were built Canadian, so they probably had the brake on the right and the clutch on the left, which is the way a lot of people set them up. And as for braking, all I do if you're pulling on is just clutch in, roll off the throttle, and then pull the brake. If you pull the brake and you still got the throttle revving away, you don't get a clutch in. So yeah, they're just quirky bikes, you know. I think once you've got the hang of the foot clutch, you'll be all right on the brake, yeah. Because your immediate thing to do on a motorbike, if you're used to riding British bikes, is bang, front brake. Not, oh shit, that, you know. It's all on. If you can, like, I ride them around the industrial estate here. You got time to think about it. If a car stops at you in the middle of the road,
it's instinct, then, isn't it?
Yeah, you just automatically go like that. If there isn't anything there, oh shit, the brake's that side. It's just getting used to it. But like I say, clutch in, roll off the throttle before you pull the brake, should be fine.
What's the purpose and function of the auxiliary clutch lever?
It was basically put on for the Canadian market, because they were generally, being Canada, they had a lot of British bikes, you know, when we're part of the empire, all that.
Yeah.
So it was set up for British riders as such. So you had a hand clutch on them. Yeah. Unless you get them adjusted perfectly, again, they don't work. It was just an afterthought that Harley put on. You can get them right. You just got to play around with them a lot. It's very, very finite adjustment on them. Yeah. Because otherwise you lose your foot clutch. So what I tend to do when I'm riding them, use your foot clutch, hold your hand clutch in, and then you can feather off your foot clutch. And if you're getting a slight bit of drag, you know, it wants to go forwards, because they are hard to adjust, then you can ride it on the hand clutch.
Okay.
Yeah? Once you're rolling, just use your foot clutch. Yeah. You don't need to use, you know, once you first, second, third, down to second, blah, blah, blah. It's literally, I just use them for pulling away, and it is easier than using the foot clutch. A lot of people put them on WLAs, the American ones, just to make them easier to ride. Yeah.
Stacey King, how do you set the backlash after you replace the generator on the WLA flathead?
It's probably easier over there, I can show you, yeah? Right, okay. So that's your generator, yeah? Mm-hmm. It's missing its thrower on that, and these should have a little ring piece on there, but he knows about that. Right, your backlash is on the gears here. See that? Yeah. Yeah. I think it should be 3 thou.
Okay.
So if you've got a DTI or whatever, you can set it up on there. Make sure that's moving through. Basically, if you've got a little bit of movement there, you're okay. And what I do, you've got two. Right, so you've got 2 longer bolts that hold the generator in there and there, yeah?
Yeah.
Now the way you shim it, what I do is I just put a couple of nuts behind there, 2 like 1/2 inch nuts, yeah? Mm-hmm. So you can lock that up tight. Okay? And then that will give you a rough. The way you shim it is, so you take those off, start off with, undo that, generator will just pull out, yeah?
Yeah.
Get yourself some gasket paper, like this, yeah? Okay? Just cut 1 pad of gasket paper that fits here. Okay?
Yeah.
Put a hole in it. See that there? That's a drain hole. Instead of oil going everywhere, it will fall down and go out of that hole. Okay? So start with 3 shims. 3, because it's only very thin. Okay? Put your 3 bits of paper under there. Put him back in there. Locate your bolts with a couple of nuts on, pull him up tight, yeah? Mm-hmm. Then do that up. You don't have to go mad with that, just pinch it, okay? And then that way, then you've got, because you've got a little bit of leeway in there, see, on the bolts. So you've got 3 shims in there.
Yeah.
Check this. Realistically, you don't want any more than about that, look. That, if anything, is probably a little bit too loose. So get it down so you just sort of got that much movement, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got, with the 3 shims in, that nipped up, those 2 done up with a couple of nuts, that's holding it all square to the face of the casing.
Yeah.
If it's going clonk, 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 take out 1 shim, try it again.
Yeah.
Still too tight, take out 1 shim, try it again. But you want, see that's too tight, tip him down a bit, you want about that, look.
Okay.
So you can just hear it clonk, yeah? So basically by up and down on those shims, making sure that these 2 are locked up with 2 nuts on, then that pulls that in square to the casing. So if you pull that in square to the casing and then crank the shit out of that, it's going to bend it down like that. That's why you put your shims in. You want to keep it all nice and square and then double check again. Sweet.
Ziggy.
Plays guitar.
He does. Do you know who supplies spare parts for old Indians?
There's a couple of places in Europe, but I would have thought if I'm taking that's Canada, Alberta. I would have thought you'd have more chance of getting stuff over there than here. There's certainly a few places in Europe I've found, yeah. Indian parts Europe is one. They're into their Indians, big style.
Yeah.
So that's one. But I would have thought, being in America or Canada, just do a Google search on it and you'll come up with more than I ever will. Taco Motors Amsterdam, indianspeedparts.co.uk. I would have thought you'd have picked up more over there than you would here, you know.
My question. One of the most recent Fred War bikes.
Yep.
And you said, oh, I'm not sure what year this is. And I said, I think it's a 45. And someone said, no, they didn't do 45s. Which got me thinking, really. So Fred War built bikes out of bits.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, he bought up all sorts of spare parts and stuff that was obviously, I would say, left here in the Lend-Lease after the war. Because they couldn't take anything home. They just left it here.
But if you've got a warehouse full of parts, and you say you go along, go, right, I'll grab that frame there, and I'll grab that engine there, and that gearbox, and blah, 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 and you make it up of all the bits and pieces.
Yep.
What year is that bike? Is that a 2022 WLA, or is that what determines, what dictates what it is? If you started from nothing and you just grab bits from lots of different years.
The only thing you can go by is they'll give you a rough guide. If you've got an original set of casings with 42 WLA and then an engine number, you get a rough guideline of when that engine number, was around and about. And then your line bore number underneath has actually got a date on it. It'll be 41, 42, 43, 44, blah, blah, blah. But you're making it up.
What happens if you just made it out of repro parts?
I suppose if you went to the Harley Davidson Owners Club and you tried to get a dating letter, but whether they'd accept reproduction parts.
If you build a bike, a wartime WLA at a repro parts in 2022,
yeah,
technically that would be a 2022 WLA.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. You might get an age-related number on it, I don't know.
I guess it would be a replica.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, half of them out there, there's an original one out there, they're all made up out of parts, a lot of, you'll be very, 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 very lucky to find one that is totally original. Unless it's in a box wrapped in cosmoline.
I suppose a lot of these bikes, as bits wear out, they get replaced with repo parts, and before you know it, the old trigger's broom, isn't it?